you have described yourself as biracial.
Mhm.
And I wonder how your identity shapes your experience in that classical world.
Well, I've always felt like a bit of a outlier from the beginning, even before I was playing classical music, because there were not a lot of biracial or maybe non-white people where I grew up. And so obviously classical music, there's not a lot of that. It never really was something I thought about. Maybe it could have been naive of me, but I always just really focused on the music and what I felt like I needed to do. There are elements of me feeling like people do see you slightly differently, or maybe take you less seriously, or I would say even expect less. I did feel some of that energy in my direction, but ultimately it wasn't something that I felt like was, yeah, I don't know, that I felt like was significant to me in my journey. But I know maybe that's not how it is for other people. For me, it was just all about focusing on what I needed to do what I wanted to do within the space. And whatever that ended up being, I felt like I would be okay with.
In an orchestra, the double bass rarely claims the spotlight. It sits at the foundation of the sound, steady, powerful, often unseen, but essential to everything around it. My guest today has built his life around that instrument. Taylor Abbitt is a double bassist who has performed on some of the world's most respected stages, from the Gothenburg Symphony Orchestra to Carnegie Hall. A graduate of the Juilliard School, where he studied with Joseph Conyers, he was recently awarded third prize in the Audience Choice Award at the Sphinx competition, a recognition not just of technical excellence, but of artistic voice. But beyond the accolades, there's something more compelling about Taylor and his music. There's a sense that the music is not only being performed, but lived through Taylor from the inside out. This is At the Podium, and I'm Patrick Huey. Today, we're talking about discipline, identity, and what it takes to build a life around an instrument that often sits just beneath the surface. But before we begin, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment below to help support my channel. Taylor, welcome to At the Podium.
Thank you for having me. That was a very nice intro, much better than I could have said myself.
Thank you. Thank you. It's your life, so it's just being reflected back to you. I want to know, I recall being maybe in junior high school, my sixth grade year, 11 years old. And my mom was like, okay, you're going to be in the band. And so, and I think she picked the saxophone for me. She may have chosen that instrument for me, which was a good choice for me. But I'm curious, out of all the instruments that you could have chosen, woodwinds, brass, percussion, how did you land on the double bass as your instrument?
Well, when I was 11, in fourth grade for me, and we had a required music course that we had to take, and we either had to play a string instrument or sing in the choir. And I knew I didn't want to sing in the choir, so I had to pick a string instrument. And they go down the line. They do violin, viola, cello, bass. And the bass was just was the biggest, and I also thought it was the coolest. And I just thought there's something about how it made the room shake. You could hear the light fixtures in the ceiling rattle when the teacher demonstrated it. And so pretty much that's why I chose the bass. And I almost didn't get to play it because I remember my mom wasn't too enthused about it because of the size. And she made me a deal where if it could fit in our car, then I could do it. But secretly, she thought it wasn't going to fit in the car. And so when we eventually got back and tested it out at fifth, and I'm sure she's like, "Oh no," but and so that's how I started with the bass.
Hmm. At what point did you become aware that your relationship to music and to the bass was different? That there might be something exceptional there for you? And I only ask because I think, particularly with strings, it's so hard in the beginning. It's a lot of like screaming cats when you're listening to people first start on string instruments. Um, I guess the honking sound of the woodwinds is not great either. But when did you know that this was something that you could really do and excel at?
I guess, well, at the end of every school year, when we were playing in our school orchestra, they'd have everyone like play whatever piece they were working on for the year or the whole orchestra. And for whatever reason, that particular year, this was in sixth grade, I decided I would just practice my piece a lot. And I remember the reception from my classmates after I played was, it was so great. And it felt so nice to have some sort of recognition. And it made me want to chase that feeling. And I felt like there was more to it than just it being part of my school curriculum. And that sort of inspired me to start thinking about it in a bigger aspect. But I don't know if I ever really, even then, felt like it was something I could do professionally or for a living. But at least it started the getting the gears to turn on that, and then that made me want to practice more and get more involved. And then I, discover all these cool YouTube videos of people playing my instrument and get even more inspired. Yeah, I'd say from there it was more like a snowball effect that started from there.
Did you go straight from high school to Juilliard, or did you take time off?
No, I took quite some time off. I took multiple gap years, I guess. So I graduated in 2015 was when I finished high school. And then I believe I started at Juilliard in 2020. And my first year was fully on Zoom, I remember.
Right.
Yeah.
So what were you doing between 2015 and 2020 to continue developing your skill set and your acumen as an artist?
My first year after high school was sort of like a searching year, I guess, because I knew I always wanted to play the bass and I knew I always wanted to go to school for the bass, but I wasn't 100% convinced at the moment that I wanted to go for classical music, which is what I'm doing now. There's a big part of me that wanted to also see what I could do in jazz playing. So I was sort of stuck between the two and didn't really know which way I wanted to go. So the first year was kind of just searching for the answer to that question, which ultimately I feel like I found. And I was playing a lot at Skidmore College, kind of brought in as a ringer, I guess you could say, someone who's professional or quasi-professional to play with the college students who play instruments, but it's sort of more secondary at that school. So that's what I did for the first year. And then for the next two, I moved to Los Angeles, and I was fortunate to meet some people who were pretty well connected, and I got to do some gigs there, like playing as like an extra musician in TV shows and whatnot, or some studio gigs, and like a whole array of different things, and playing in orchestras also. So I got to see a lot of different sides of what professional bass playing could look like. And then sort of the last year and a half was me realizing, okay, I do want to do classical music. So the next step is I have to go to a school. As much as I didn't want to, I was kind of like, no one really takes you seriously if you're like, yeah, I didn't really study anywhere. So that was really the logical step. So then the last year that was just preparing to audition for school. And then luckily everything worked out, and then I started in
Well,
20.
who were your jazz influences? You said you were trying to determine whether you were going to walk down a path of jazz or a classical discipline.
For me, Christian McBride was huge for me. The amount of videos I've seen of him doing these crazy jazz bass solos. I mean, there's endless stuff of him playing insane things on the bass. And that was a huge inspiration. Jaco Pastorius, Ray Brown, they had a lot of footage of them to just watch. And so I would always try to copy things that they did and try to impress my friends, uh, and all that. But for me, those were mainly the jazz influences for me, bass wise.
How did the classical training that you had and the rigor of that training impact you playing as a jazz bassist? Where there's a certain level of perceived improvisation, I think, that happens in jazz that you don't necessarily see in classical music. But I do think, from observing and speaking with many musicians who play jazz, they talk about the importance of a classical training just from understanding chord structure and how music is built. And also because that then informs what the improvisation looks like, because you actually understand music structure.
Yeah, that's a good. And there's a lot of jazz musicians too who say it's really important to learn classical playing and sort of practice in sort of with a classical like regiment to how you practice. I mean, it only helps. I think what it does is allows you to have possibility in your facility of playing, like your technical ability. The whole point, I think, is to be able to express your ideas in jazz and have a lot of situational awareness and react. But the technical aspect is sort of the bridge of how you're able to communicate through the instrument. And the more classical chops I think you have allows you to open doors that maybe otherwise you might be hindered from doing. And you do see it often with jazz bass players, like the technique may not be on a classical level, perhaps, whatever that is, but they're able to make it work and they're still able to sing to the instrument. But yeah, it only helps because certain people who do have it, they can play. For example, you can play a lot faster. You can, I guess, play more in tune. You can do all those things. That doesn't necessarily serve the music, but just allows you to be able to do what you want to do much more easily, I felt like. So for me, doing the two, it was a lot easier for me to just be able to just play things. But the challenge for me was not understanding the jazz language of harmonies and okay, what do I play over this chord, or what do I do here? How do I sync with the drummer and whatnot?
So when I was watching you play online, I specifically watched when you played the concerto for bass #1. Was that at the Sphinx competition that I was watching that? And there was something quite interesting that I observed, that I think it's a split. And I was trained as an actor at the Yale Drama School, and everyone has an approach to their work, correct? And everyone has an approach to how they choose to interpret. As you use the language, how you make the instrument sing convincingly. You've said that before. And I noticed what drew me. And so I wasn't surprised when they said that you won the Audience Choice Award, because what I observed in you was that you're not playing an instrument. There's something much deeper happening in terms of what you're expressing through the bass, the double bass, which made me think, from the acting side, we talk about actors who have technique. So when you go to a school like Yale, people who went to Juilliard and NYU, there's a focus on building technique because the technique becomes a thing that allows you to have a career. Or if you're a singer, not to blow your voice out after you sing one Aida and then you have no technique, you're done. You'll never sing again. I feel that probably happens within the classical music world too. There are players who are technicians who will probably have a strong technique. There may not be much emotional expression through them. And then you have players who are, and if I'm wrong, correct me, you have players who may have a more emotional approach to the work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the geniuses blend them both, or at least give the appearance of blending them both. And I use the word give the appearance because we can never know what's inside somebody. We can only guess based upon certain signals and behaviors. But as I was watching you play the concerto, I literally had the thought to myself, what were you feeling in that moment when you were playing? There was something else going on that to me elevated the entire, even what the orchestra was playing behind you, had to rise to meet where you were. What were you feeling, if you can remember, in that moment?
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're a podcast host or someone wanting to be interviewed on podcasts as a guest, visit podmatch.com. Podmatch automatically connects ideal podcast guests and hosts together for interviews. We always say it works just like a dating app, but instead of connecting you for dates, it connects you for podcast interviews. Podmatch has connected over 85,000 guests and hosts together for interviews that listeners love, all while saving you countless hours of administrative work through built-in automations. If you're ready to level up your podcast interviews on either side of the mic, start today by visiting podmatch.com.
Other than hoping I just get through the piece, was that piece. It's Concerto Number 1 by Andres Martin. He's a bass player. It's one of our few good pieces we have. And I think what's interesting about that is for whatever reason, I feel like the harmonies in the piece, it almost feels like I would have done that, or I sort of feel like I resonate with it. So for me, I think I remember I was just trying to really play the gestures of it in the most true way that I can, to think like how I feel like it should be done in the most proper way I could. But in that moment specifically, everything felt sort of very easy. Like it sort of felt like I could do anything I wanted, which I think is rare in a setting like that. Of course, the orchestra was very good, and they helped me and supported me, and they were following me wherever I was going. So I think that had a lot to do with it. But I think in some ways I was along for the ride, because I was also riding off of all the preparation I did to be able to memorize it and get it to the level where I'd be able to perform it. But a bit of it was also in the moment and just trying to get across the ideas I had as true as I could, and just let the preparation I had show.
You said that when you play, you want to play convincingly. And I wonder, what does that journey look like for you from when you first read or encounter a piece to when you actually arrive at that place of conviction? And then how do you know that you've crossed into the threshold of playing it convincingly?
As you know, it's like a process once you get a piece of music. And I would first start by breaking it down into, okay, what's the technical plan? What am I going to do for fingerings or bowings and whatnot? And once that's solved, then I'll try to understand like where the music is and how does the technique serve the music. And if it doesn't, then scrap whatever technical plan I have and then like revise it so I can say what I want to say. And I think part of getting it through the threshold of being convincing is like I'll always record myself when I practice every day. And something a teacher told me was, when you record something, don't listen back to it right away. Save it until you almost forget about what you were thinking when you were practicing. So at some point later that day or the next day, I'll be listening to other music by people that I like in respect. And then maybe I'll throw on a recording from a practice session I had. And then coming fresh from listening to all this other music and I listen to that, if I'm like, I don't know if that makes sense actually, or, oh, it's kind of working here, but this needs to get fixed through as much objective listening as I can to my own playing. If I feel fully satisfied with it, I feel like that's where it becomes more in the convincing range. But that is usually done after like weeks of just doing that sort of listening process and feeling like it's something that I would be comfortable playing this in front of people, because it's what I feel like I can do, or it's the best I can do in this moment.
The mezzo-soprano Denise Graves once said in a class, your best days are never when you're singing at the Met. Your best days are when you're in your house doing the laundry. And I wonder for you if that is something that is familiar to you, that the best is not always in the Sphinx competition. It's the dress rehearsal where you blow it out of the water, and then in the competition, it's not your best moment. And then what is carrying you through that?
No, absolutely. It's always the best playing is always when you're practicing. It's always like at 2 a.m. On a Tuesday or something. But then you have to somehow repeat that on Saturday at 7 p.m. And I think I've learned to practice in a way that being aware that it's going to drop some levels. So I would strive to make it at whatever I do at an unattainable level, or I guess try to transcend my playing every time I do something. And then when things do not happen, it's not as detrimental mentally while you're playing because you expect it.
I interviewed a gentleman on the show. He studied ballet at ABT in New York, and he's now performing with a ballet company in Germany. And he said that part of his journey was learning to not be a good student, that no one's paying $150 for a seat in the back of the orchestra to watch you be a good student. They assume the technical proficiency is there. They want to have the emotional experience. And I wonder for you, if you've had to go through the same process of learning to not necessarily be a good student, but to be a good professional and to be an artist, and how do you balance the two and telling the story of it?
Yeah, I had to actually kind of go through this a bit because you do learn all these really rigorous technical things. And as good as that is, a lot of people do get stuck in the weeds of just thinking about that. I mean, ultimately, you want to be your own teacher. You want to get to a point where you take what you've learned and can discern the difference between, okay, like, yes, we need to play it perfectly in tune and play in time, have a good sound, all these things. But at a certain point, that doesn't serve the music as much. I mean, those are just tools to get there. So particularly for the Sphinx competition and whatnot, I sort of felt like I had to get rid of not all, but it felt like almost most of what I knew to play the repertoire in a way that I thought could be something that I wanted to present. Because as bass players, when we're studying, all we're learning is how to win a orchestral job, really. And so all of these extra musical things are just kind of like the cherry on top and the sprinkle at the end. And it's almost kind of dismissed. So the way I was taught classically, a lot of those things really almost would get in the way of playing a lot of the solo rep I had to do for Sphinx. So there's a long process of trying to figure out what I wanted to take with me and what I wanted to just kind of leave behind to come up with, I guess, my own sound.
Does playing make you happy?
Yes, it does, which is why I do it. Uh, but particularly playing things I like to play. What do you mean, like in terms of the type of music I would play, or just playing in general, the feeling of playing?
All of it. All of it.
Yeah, there's good days and bad days. What's always helped me with the ups and downs is just having a goal. But I mean, also just physically playing. There's nothing like playing a low C string on the bass, because everything's just vibrating and going crazy. And just physically, I mean, it is fun to play. But what makes it better is when there's music you're playing that's also really satisfying to play as well. And then on top of that, when you're in the orchestra and you're in a section of 8 bass players and everyone's playing simultaneously, if you sit on the right low note in the right piece, the sound just sort of creates this kind of localized subwoofer that you can feel, because all the notes are feeding into each other and all the frequencies are elevated. So you get this like kind of this low hum if you sit on the right note and it's just in tune in the right way. So yeah, it is very satisfying.
Mm. When you are learning a piece or when you have performed a piece, do you ever feel that it's complete? Or is it always something that you're in conversation with?
Always in conversation with it. I feel like whenever you perform something is kind of as far as you could get in the moment, or as far as you could get with the time that you had. And when you pick it up again, it's not like you're just learning it and then playing it. It's sort of like you start from where you left off. And now you have this amount of time to bring it to this next place. And even then it's just, that's how far you got the next time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll always try to, if I'm performing something, I'll always try to play it once somewhere before and then get some time away from it and then come back to it later. Because coming back to something that you've already done, you have all these other ideas from all these other things you played that you can then bring into it. Even if it's like an orchestral excerpt for an audition that's like 30 seconds long, it's an endless process of different approaches even. So yeah, everything's always kind of slowly developing.
You feel comfortable in that process?
I would say I'm getting better at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just coming to terms with nothing is ever fully done.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it easier. Once I realize that for me, then it becomes more fun, because then it's like, okay, so we're, well, maybe more of a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, and challenges can be fun. So
Where does the music come from within you?
I don't know. The music in me, I think, well, I like to listen to music. So
That's good.
I think that helps.
Yeah.
And I think as I've gotten older, I've sort of defined more of what I like to hear, particularly particular people and how they play and how they go about certain pieces of music. For me, it just comes from trying to put together all the things that I like in the things that I play. I mean, yeah, just like picking up pieces that I've left and developing them. I feel like it's the same way, like where the music comes from is always, yeah, I don't know if it would be a particular thing or not, but it sort of just is what it is in the moment.
So you've obviously performed and you're performing in classical, traditional sort of classical settings, but you've also performed with artists like Kid Cudi. You have appeared in campaigns against cyberbullying, I think, for AT&T. So I look at you and the diversity of musical influences, media, and wonder what kind of artist are you building or becoming? And how do you think about your identity as the scope of what you do branches out past Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, etc.?
I always like to explore, and I like adventure, musical adventures and whatnot. So I don't like to necessarily be forced into one thing. So I'm open to other things. Like, oh, that could be fun. This could be interesting. I've never done this before. Why not?
Who is Joseph Conyers as a force in your life, and what did he awaken or change for within you, your life?
He was an amazing force in my life. It almost feels like he picked me up off the street and just kind of like really helped me out. Because it was during my gap when I knew I wanted to go to school, he was the guy that I wanted to study with. He was the number one guy. And I'm so fortunate that everything, worked out how it did and I got to study with him. But I say what he gave me, the most important thing was the ability to develop my ears. I think what he does with his students, which is really good, is he helps them develop their ability to listen to music, I think, in a more deep way, to really understand what people are doing when they're playing and why they're doing it, and identify these different sort of musical concepts, not by theory, but by ear, to sort of transcend the theory aspects. And I think that ability is what I feel like helped me the most and led me to where I am now. Yeah, I remember the first year I started over COVID. He gave me a lot of like listening homework. And I would just listen to these pieces over and over again to try to understand it in the way that he sort of wants you to. And there's also a lot of books on this sort of idea of listening to music as if it's a language.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was obsessed with trying to understand how to hear music in a way that people could actually be talking to you through the instrument and playing in a way that's sort of like spoken word, and each phrase has its own grammar and syllables, and certain people who know how to do it put the notes in just the right place, just the right time, just the right cadence. And I think that alone has helped me the most, because then, through practice, then you can just sort of be like, okay, no, I want it to sound like this because I remember what that was, and that's what I want to do. So it's like jazz in a way. It's just, you know what you want to do, you have the technical ability, and so it's just, how long does it take you to get to that point where you could play it how you hear it?
Yeah. Why Juilliard? There's so many fantastic music programs in the country. Why Juilliard?
I did not get very good grades in high school. So it was one of the few places that would probably take me as a musician.
That's fair. That's fair.
I sort of had to go that direction, but I also wanted to go that direction because that's where Joseph Conyers was teaching, and they have 5 of the best bass teachers in the U.S. I feel like, and also it's pretty collaborative amongst all the 5 teachers. So you get a really great idea of these different perspectives, but they're different perspectives that are proven to work in the classical world.
People are always curious when they find out that I went to Yale Drama School, or they call it David Geffen now, whatever they're calling it. But we always said, my classmates and I who were there together, that we were being forged in the fire as artists, as actors. but also as human beings, because these programs tend to require a lot of you as a human being to show up every day and put yourself. Most people don't seek discomfort in their daily lives, and one of the key aspects of, I would imagine, any training program is that it's asking you to move beyond comfort zones into true expression, which is always challenging for people. So I wonder for you, what did you learn at Juilliard beyond just musicianship?
Well, you really have to develop a good work ethics, get a lot of work and not enough time. I think it really forces you to look inside yourself to say, do I really want to do this? Um, and I think what I took was that being able to take different things from different people and amalgamate them is sort of the best way to grow, even as a person, because you can fight accepting that other people have things to offer. You can reject it and think that you might have the best way to do something. But I think realizing that you don't necessarily have the right way to do something, or your way of thinking about something is probably very flawed. And if you are open to other ideas, I mean, it can only do good things for you. And being able to discern good and bad things from influences you have, and try to filter out the bad and take the good and use it for you. Yeah. Other than that, I don't know. It's definitely very heavily musically focused, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. I think anytime you do any sort of elite training, the thing that you are doing is the focus, but it always reverberates beyond just the thing that you're doing, because we are integrated beings. So you don't, it's very hard to separate and sort of compartmentalize things like that, because it impacts your view of the world, I think, and what's possible potentially.
Definitely. Yeah. I also feel like it was, you sort of become more closed off to the world in a way
Yes.
too. So then it like, there's no way to get out of thinking about it beyond your instrument. And also there was a little period of time where I finally left, and it felt like, oh, I like snapped out of it and I'm back in reality again, because it does have that feeling of you're in a bubble and your world is only as big as, who are your neighbors when you're practicing. Eventually, when you're no longer there and you do need to, come back into society, I guess it's, you do have some of those things that you took with you, but I think there is another step of, learning that goes on afterwards.
Agreed. You have described yourself as biracial,
Mhm.
and I'm curious how you locate yourself within the world of classical music, a space that has a very specific history and tradition. And I wonder how your identity shaped your experience in the classical world, or does it sit separately from you and your work in that classical world?
Well, I've always felt like a bit of a outlier from the beginning, even before I was playing classical music. There were not a lot of biracial or maybe non-white people where I grew up. And so obviously classical music, there's not a lot of that. It never really was something I thought about. Maybe it could have been naive of me, but I always just really focused on the music and what I felt like I needed to do. There are elements of me feeling like people do see you slightly differently, or maybe take you less seriously, or I would say even expect less. I did feel some of that energy in my direction, but ultimately it wasn't something that I felt like was a hindrance to me. But I know maybe that's not how it is for other people who may be biracial. For me, it was just all about focusing on what I needed to do what I wanted to do within the space. And whatever that ended up being, I felt like I would be okay with.
I wonder, and this maybe I'm playing a little Sigmund Freud here, so forgive me if I am, or Carl Jung or whomever, but the bass is a foundational instrument in the orchestra. It helps keep the pace. Would you disagree or agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay. Because if not, I won't ask the question. But do you think your choice of bass represents something or speaks to something about you or within you as a person? Not a fair question, I know, because you were 11. However,
How do you say this? It's not the instrument that chooses the people, but the people that choose the instrument.
yeah,
Like, I think when you start, anyone just picks anything, but I think that the type of person you are determines who sticks with whatever instrument they happen to be playing. Is how I feel, how it goes across the board. Because bass players generally are just kind of low key, easygoing, chill people. They're fine sitting in the back and just, keeping things going. But I don't think that's because you wanted the instrument that fit you. I think you just happen to be doing it and you happen to be that way. So it sort of fits who you are as you go along. You sort of have to think about instruments in a certain way when you play them, to play them well for whatever the instrument is. Violinists are, crazy. You have these endless amount of viola jokes for them being maybe strange people. But I think it just happens to be like how you need to have that already to be able to find what works in the instrument you play.
that's so deep what you just said. It has to be in you. That opens up a whole can of worms as you think about that. Has to be there to be there to a certain degree.
Like, you can't manufacture it. But I mean, there are workarounds, but yeah, I think if you got it, you got it. I don't know.
Yeah, you can't teach someone to be Meryl Streep,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can't teach that. That's just
It's just
interesting. What kind of artist do you want to become, and what do you think that's going to require of you?
I think right now, all I would want to do is just be an artist who my constituents and, other people can just respect, and respect what they do artistically and musically. I mean, whatever place that holds, or whatever, I do or end up doing. And I think just someone who other artists can respect. I think that's the best sort of recognition you can have in that regard.
On this season of the show, I am exploring this idea of returning home. And I wonder, what is that returning home moment for you, if you've had it yet? And what does it mean to you?
What do you mean by returning home?
I moved back to where I grew up in Texas after living in New York and LA and around the world to a certain degree. And I moved back home. And at first it was a journey back home to a physical place. And then as I got here and started reestablishing my life here, it became about something else. It became about to return to a place that knew you when, or knew you through a specific lens many years later, has a specific kind of resonance, for me at least. And I find in speaking to people that oftentimes returning to home, even if you haven't physically shifted location, is often opening up something within them or returning to something within them that they may have put down, forgot about for whatever reason, but it still has a place within them. I'll use an example. in our clown class that we did at Yale, I don't know if they do it anymore, my teacher would always say, you need to go back to those toys that you dropped when you were 5 or 6 years old and pick them back up again, because those are going to serve you as an artist, that you find those things that matter to you, bring you joy, that you enjoyed. And in a way, he wasn't saying it this way, but in a way, that is how I would describe a return home.
I don't know. I guess a return home for me as an artist feels like, I guess sometimes you have these feelings of when you eventually play these pieces that you did when you were a kid or that you started, and playing, coming back to revisiting them. It's sort of like you get a lot of nostalgia and you have all these memories from when you first started, and it's sort of I guess, I don't know, it's sort of nice to see maybe how far you've come, and oh, how could I have done this when I was that age? Like that didn't make any sense. I guess for me, it would just be revisiting things that I used to do in the past, or what got me started. And I think that gives a new life to maybe things that you used to play, because I feel like sometimes you might have more to say with them because it's what inspired you to begin, and by revisiting it, you have this other side to it, this other thing you can say. But as far as returning home, I feel like that's what it would mean to me. I think that's what it would mean.
Taylor, thank you so much for your time today and for exploring your process, your art, your history. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. It was really nice to talk to you and get to, I guess, discuss some of that in my artistic journey.
It was great. Thank you. And to those of you who are watching or listening, remember, we all have a voice. We all will leave a legacy. And the journey home is how we learn to embody both. Thank you, Taylor.